I'm so happy to talk to our next guest, and I'm going to give him a big build-up, okay? This is a man who really wrote the narrative for the campaign that would stun the world and the nation. And I'm talking on substance, not on personality, but on substance. That our policies would be focused on renewing America, the American citizenry, her spirits, her economy, her military, our trade policy, our borders, and a spillover and very positive effect on our culture. And he wrote this narrative decades ago. He ran for president himself, surprised everybody in New Hampshire by winning the New Hampshire primary, and really, along with a few others, Phyllis Schlafly, who's now gone to her eternal rest. I know she's looking down on all of this with a big smile on her face, but also with a warning. Donald, if you stray off course, I'm going to be there to write my next editorial. Phyllis Schlafly, what a wonderful human being and just a patriot and brilliant woman herself. But Pat Buchanan wrote the populist playbook. And for years, he was ridiculed for it. They called him a non-conservative over at National Review. They basically wanted to throw him out of the conservative movement. And he joins us now. He's just one of my favorite people. He's one of the first interviews I ever did as a student journalist at Dartmouth College for the Dartmouth Review. And I'll still remember with my knee socks, and I literally had knee socks and wide wale corduroy skirt on that was embarrassing, in his living room with Dinesh D'Souza and I think Keeney Jones and myself. I was a freshman at Dartmouth, and I interviewed Pat Buchanan at his beautiful home in Virginia, and I was starstruck back then, and I still am all those years forward. Pat, how are you?
I'm doing just fine.
You remember
just
that?
Fine. Thank you very kindly for that very gracious introduction.
Do you remember that? That year, 1982. Remember that?
I sure do. I remember it very well in my den. Sure, I'm right there in there now. I've got my silver pitchfork from the brigades of the 1990s.
Well, Trump's going to need that.
Laura,
yeah.
Listen, Laura, there are a lot of therapy dogs and grief counselors up on that hill, I think.
Yeah, they're gonna have to have a lot of those dog poop pickup bags ready, because there's a lot of walking of those dogs to do.
Around the hill, right?
You know. So, Pat, as I said, you really wrote this playbook so many years ago, and I remember my parents were out there volunteering for you in Connecticut. Dinesh and I, and so many of us were hoping that you would again unseat the Bushes and the Doles, and again, Bob Dole, patriot, supported Trump though. But you knew that this was the menu of issues that, if packaged properly, would really connect with the American heartland and impress people in a good way. And Trump did it. He did it in a very unconventional way, and not exactly the way you would have done it, of course. But nevertheless, those issues worked, and worked well.
Well, indeed they did. And one reason they worked, several. One is, of course, Donald is a tremendous salesman. He has that big plane. He's a persona, very larger than life. But secondly, the things we warned about, we just asked for a border fence in the San Diego corridor and then along the border with Mexico. And then you said, look, these trade deals will deindustrialize this country. They'll cost us millions of manufacturing jobs and factories. And then you said, if you get involved in all these wars and keep this up, you're going to lose all the benefits of the Cold War. And the point is that the Bushes and Obamas and Clintons went ahead and pursued those policies, and the results were what Donald Trump ran against so brilliantly in 2016.
What are the perils going forward for Trump? People are worried about John Bolton being mentioned for a cabinet position because Bolton came out of the Bush School of Foreign Policy when he was UN ambassador. To me, every time he's been on this show, he was much more. I think he was much more hesitant about these big foreign policy adventures, and I think the other folks at the top of the helm at the Bush administration, I didn't find him to be the same America greatness conservative as like a more David Brooks type person. But nevertheless, conservatives are worried about him.
Well, I think what's they've got is that I think Bolton, at least I saw this morning, had called for bombing Iran, which I don't think is the right course to follow at all. And I did see, this morning I'm delighted to see the president-elect called up Vladimir Putin and said, look, we're going to have better relations with us. I've got a column this morning titled, America First, the Trump Doctrine, that would basically pursue his policies, which I think ought to be basically these. Look, you build up America's defense and the morale and strength of America's armed forces. You don't get involved in any wars over the Mischief Reef or Scarborough Shoal or Crimea or Donetsk or Luhansk. These things that aren't vital to the United States, but you protect your vital interests and vital allies. But I do think this. I think all these, Cold War, some of these commitments to go to war date back to the time I was in grammar school. And you cannot, what do we do? The Cold War is over 25 years ago. This is my problem. You and I are constantly told they're conservatives, hidebound, locked in the past. When the Cold War ended, I told somebody, look, our war is over. We've carried the load for the whole world, and now we got to repair our own country. And, some of these other countries we've carried on our backs all these years have got to carry more of the load themselves. And that's exactly, I think, Trump's message. And I think we have to do it. It's coming one day. But I think that's the resistance you're getting to Bolton that I've heard this morning.
Well, if Bolton advances Trump's agenda, however, he's very articulate, and he's deeply patriotic.
There's no doubt about that. But Bolton does appear to me, when I've seen him on TV, to have his own agenda, which I don't think coincides exactly with what Trump is up to.
Yeah, well, that certainly would have to be worked out, and that would have to be established if he's in the
one person I'm relying on here is mainly it's like, look, you remember Reagan when he came in. Some of us were not altogether pleased when Gergen and Darman and Baker arrived in the West Wing.
I remember those days.
But you had Ed Meese in there you trusted. You
awesome.
Had Camp over defense. And what you had was basically the fellow in the Oval Office was going to make the call. And these guys were going to implement the decision. And that's basically what happened. But we had some, difficulties in those years as well, even before I got in there myself.
And Pat, you headed up the communications office, correct?
It was communications, right?
And what does communications oversee?
Well, the communications office it's the largest office in the White House outside the NSC. It had public liaison, it had speech writing under it. It had the TV office, all the communications. And I was sort of director of a lot, the policy, the putting together the communications policy. Say, if you're going to get contra aid, Ollie North and I would head this group, and you would set up the speeches, the op-eds, all the other things, get the speech written for the president just before the vote came on all of these issues. But it's, when you're in the White House, let me say this, Laura, you can carve out a position, like when I've just finished my book on Nixon's White House.
Oh, I can't wait to read that.
And I was the sole conservative in there, and I had lines to Richard Nixon from 3 years before. So you got the president passing over all these people, calling you at night, and he wanted to read your memos, which I used to write constantly. I must have written him 1,000 of them.
Wow.
And you had a real influence over the direction of the campaigns and even policy. And you'd say, let me write this veto. And so, people can have real influence, and there's others who may have a line, maybe have a higher title, whom the president just doesn't pay any attention to, who doesn't really have an agenda and doesn't really fight for it. But this is interesting about Bannon in there. People are knocking, Bannon.
It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Here's a guy that was loyal to him, who's from another part of his constituency, which is in a critical part, which is populist and nationalist, and who really is in touch with what's going on in the world the way that a lot of Republicans are not, and who knows why the guy got elected and what was the indispensable element. And I think it's vital that you have him in there talking to the President of the United States.
Well, how about the fact that they want a trophy on their wall, the left? They've lost across the board. They've lost state houses, governorships. Obama's presided over the loss of, 15 Senate seats? 15 Senate seats over the last 8 years. And their big lesson from all of this, Pat, is that, they need Steve Bannon's head on the wall. That's just the dumbest. It's bad politics. It's just stupid.
You know what they're doing? They're doing exactly what they always. Here's the thing. Somebody got elected whom they said was a disaster, a horrible thing for America. It's the end of the republic. As soon as he's elected, they said, now you have to give us reassurances.
Right.
In all your appointments, you have to come back basically to adopt the positions and the people whom you've just repudiated and rejected. Otherwise, the crying rooms will not close.
Well, I'm hoping that given Trump's demeanor and his own focus on this populist agenda, when people were trying during the campaign to get him to back off from it, he didn't. Never backed off from it.
Not only it's the right. It's in my judgment, he's taken the correct position. He's analyzed things instinctively correctly. He's got people that support that agenda, people that are dependent on
Democrats support it.
Implement that agenda, and even the iron is never going to be hotter than it's going to be on his first day in office. And so that's why I really believe he ought to, as Churchill said, action this day from day one.
This is what Glenn Beck said about Steve Bannon yesterday. Let's listen.
Steve Bannon, he's a nightmare. Bannon has a clear tie to white nationalists.
He goes on to say he's anti-Semitic. I mean, we could have played a whole rant from Glenn.
What does he think the guy's going to do? I mean, he's going to lead the fight to repeal the Civil Rights Act of '64? What do they think these folks are going to do? He's in the White House.
I mean, they seem unhinged. They seem unhinged. I mean, I think it's you're half expecting the old straitjacket people to come out.
Let me tell you a little story about Gergen. When I went into the White House in 1985, in the second term, beginning of the second term, and he heard the appointment, he had a quote: "This appointment is fraught with peril."
Great. That's a sign it was a good appointment.
It's exactly. The point is, if you've got an appointment that sets those people teeth on edge, you're probably, it's not an absolute truth, but you're probably doing the right thing.
Hey, Pat, I have to ask you about the leadership in the House and Senate. A lot of conservatives who are very giddy about this win, and don't blame them for being giddy about it. There are very few of us who predicted that Trump would sweep the nation. Right. They want Ryan out, they want McConnell out, they want to scrape all the barnacles from the bottom of the ship, and they want a new team in place. What is your thought?
Well, my thought is that I think look, Trump has won the election. He's got the one branch of government. What I would do, I wouldn't interfere in what the folks are going to do in the House or the Senate and what they want to do. And I would tell them, look, I'm going to work with the Republican leadership, whoever the leader is in the House and Senate. I would stay out of this particular battle, to be honest, rather than get into it. I think if you got into it and you lost, you'd have a real problem. And so what I would do is just say I will support whoever the Republican House chooses as leader, and I'll support work with whoever the senators choose as leader, and let them go forward and do the battle if they want to do it.
And Pat, we're almost out of time, but it was my suggestion that Trump continues the campaign across the country, campaigning for American renewal and populist ideals, the American first approach to governance, by continuing to engage with disaffected communities, African American communities, Latino churches. What do you think about that idea?
I think exactly. Look, clearly to build and enlarge upon the constituency that won the election, you've got to make gains in the African American community, and you've got to make gains in the Latino community. And I think you do it if you bring about prosperity, if, frankly, you cut taxes on small businesses. All the Hispanics and black businesses are small. Reach out to, African American, not only religious leaders, but vets and others. I mean, we're not going to get 50% of them, but he did surprisingly well. And frankly, if you show these folks we aren't hostile, we're not demons, and we are interested in the whole country, and prosperity will help us all, and then try to bring it about, I think you do better. And if you do better, then you hold the White House.
Pat Buchanan, Trump Doctrine, America First. It's our featured selection on Facebook and LauraIngraham.com. Pat, you're the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend.
All right, we'll take a break. Don't go away.